So high level here. Hey guys, want to thank everybody who is present for attending our standard webinar for the release 1.83. So Sean McFeely is going to go over the contents here in just a little bit. Just kind of rules of the road. We always have the same format. He'll walk through all these, all the updates to SmartBuild, review the features. As we're going, we'll keep everybody muted. However, there is a chat button in the upper right-hand corner. So if you have any questions as he's going through and reviewing, please just use that chat button to submit your question. We'll have somebody who fields those questions and texts them to Sean so that he can respond to them even while he's presenting, but we won't have a Tower of Babel with a bunch of people trying to talk. And so that's our standard procedure as we go through this process. And at the tail end, what we like to do is we save a lot of time. Usually we try to save a good full like 20 minutes where we'll go open it up and go through just general Q&A and discussion. And that's always very enlightening and very lively. So we will do that today as well. So that's pretty much the format as we go through this process. So just kind of high level, just to kind of review where we are, the current landscape. We know we're very, very sensitive to the fact that that SmartBuild has slowed down, okay? And so the only focus I'm going to have about development is that this is 1.83 we're coming out with. We've made some modifications. We won't know for sure till it goes live, but we're hoping for at least some improvement in the speed. But realistically, in 1.84, we have a couple of major tasks we're focusing on that should speed up the kind of the refresh rate on the software. So that'll be focused on in 1.84. 1.85, then we hope to return to kind of the heavy duty project at hand, which is largely about the barn dominium market. And so we'll return to our 2D input and getting to the point where we can address interior floor layout, wall input, that kind of capability. And we're also going to be focusing on enhancement for porches, which is something that we know there's just so much detail work to be done there. And that's an important part of not just barn dominiums, but just for any kind of a structure, post frame, or all metal buildings. So that'll be coming up in 1.85 as well. So, so high level, that's kind of where we are and what we have for priorities moving forward. As always, we invite everybody to make program requests. We don't lose them. We document them, we maintain them, and we typically work on consensus, you know, as we prioritize what we're going to work on next. So, so that's the standard operating procedure that will continue to drive our efforts and our resource application. So we appreciate everybody coming today. I'll hand it over to Sean, and we'll review the latest work that our team has accomplished here. So go ahead, Sean.
Okay, thanks, Keith. All right, so one thing I'll point out, I am using the beta site for this demonstration. What we're about to see here, again, is not on live yet. We are looking at Monday evening to release this to live. So we're holding on to this. We're doing some additional beta testing. So it will be coming out, but you won't see this for a few days. You can get onto this beta site. This is a totally separate site with the same code. We copied over the data, so it's fairly recent. It's not going to be the same as your current live database, but it does have newer stuff on here. You can come in here. It's the same website. You put beta in front of it, and you log in with the same login. So before Monday evening, if you do want to jump on here and kind of mess around and check some of the stuff out before it goes live, you can do that. But what we're seeing here today, this is going to be beta, and this will come out live Monday evening is what we're shooting for. Okay, so I'm going to run through all the new stuff. I'm not going to get super detailed about anything, but again, like he said, at the end, we'll open it up and we can talk about whatever, but we can also get into any of these items here if we need to do some more detail. You can also call our support line as time goes on and get information on these if you need to also. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here, I'm going to go into just one thing in the settings. There's a few changes that you'll need to do in the settings to utilize some of these things. And as I'm going to go into a job here in a little bit, and I'll point out areas where you need to come into the settings. But there is one thing in the settings that I wanted to show you, and that is in the trusses. So one of the new items here in 1.83 is the ability to have a range of spacings. So you can have a truss that works for a minimum spacing through the maximum spacing. And so you can come in here and set these. I do have one set that we'll actually see demonstrated, where I just have a 0 spacing up to a 10-foot spacing. So this is a specific truss here that you'll see when we get into the job. And previously you got one spacing. So this truss worked at 10 foot on center. If you changed to 8 foot on center, then you had to have a different truss. Now what you can do is you potentially reduce the size of your database, and you can have a range of spacing. So a single truss is, kind of works up to 10-foot spacing. And we'll take a look at that, but you can come in here with you can download this whole truss catalog, and you can update these and then re-upload that. You can also come in here to individual trusses, and this is going to be the setting here where this one goes across, but here's the minimum spacing, here's the max. So you can come in here and change these manually. You can also use that download to update these. So potentially you could get rid of some trusses in here if you need to. And there are going to be some other things. You go into the setup wizard to add some materials to some new capabilities. And again, I'll point those out once we get into a job. So I'm going to go into this particular job that I started working on to demonstrate some of these things. And so we'll see a little bit of slowness here probably. The beta site does run a little bit slower. But again, these are improvements that we're going to be working on, especially 1.84. And yeah, also with the go-to meeting, it kind of slows us down. Okay, there we go. Maybe the first thing that we'll demonstrate here is, let's just look at those trusses since we just looked at it. And actually, I don't have an exact match here because I do have an overhang on this building. That truss does not have an overhang. So let's actually come in here. I'm going to get rid of the overhang, and also we'll take a look at the spacing here actually on the roof. Oh, you know what? I'm actually using the base spacing here. So here, this is the spacing for my building. I'm using the base spacing at 10 foot on center. And I'll just hit refresh as I changed that overhang just to get this to match. So now we have this truss that matches. This is the one that we were looking at actually there at the top of the list. 10-foot spacing, all these things here. Now, the thing that you'll notice, so just to demonstrate what this is going to do, I can change this to anything below. I had that 0 to 10, so we could go to a 4-foot spacing if we wanted to or needed to. And what we should see is this truss is not going to change. So that is the same truss here, and it's just going to pick up that 4-foot spacing and put it there. This is not exact match because this is my gable, or actually I guess it's the opposite here. And I did not set up my span here for this common truss. So this one is not recognizing it. This is the old behavior. It's saying, this is a 10-foot on center spacing truss and you have 4 foot. That doesn't work. But this one up here, we'll just use that range. If we go to 12, which is beyond that 10-foot range, then you're just going to end up with both of these not matching at this point. So that's how that works. It just allows you to have a range of spacings. And this works with bay spacing. This also will work with your roof truss spacing, or if you're using your single truss carrier, it'll work using your wall spacing. Okay, so that's that item. Next thing we'll look at are some headers here. So I have a couple overhead doors, and we have the settings for the overhead door for post framing here. I have this trough header 2-ply. And what we've added here, this is not going to change the way that we can set up these headers, but we do have a new setting, this header high, and there is also a material associated with that. And so this is only going to apply to your sidewalls. But if I turn on that header high, and if we hit refresh, we'll see how this is going to operate. So right now I do have a double truss carrier up here, but the header high it's going to span to the next on-center post on either side of the opening. And so I went into my setup wizard and I added some materials for this new header high material. This is going to be just like any other material, your truss carrier material or your girts or purlins. You need to go in there and add in materials. I just kind of made up this bar joist 14-inch depth, I guess 1.5 inches just item here. And we could have multiple products in here. If I say none, there's just going to be nothing up there. But so you can go in and you can add in some different materials, and you can use these like this header high for these openings. It's just going to be for the overheads and the sliders. This is not going to affect the gable walls. You can also see it's not going to change the header I had for the overhead door up here. You could change this to something else. Maybe you don't need this 2-ply trough now that we have this header up here. And you can go into the advanced edit to individually, maybe just this one overhead door. We want to change up some of this framing, but we could leave it for the other overhead doors, or like this. In this case, it'd be this gable would stay the same. So you can go into advanced edit and you can manipulate the framing on these individual openings. And you'll note, the other item here is this is a single. I have it as a single right now, so you can have the single header that can span from this on-center to on-center post and over the top of this, but you can change it to single, double, triple, or the quad. I think that's pretty much all that we need to say at this point for that. So we have that header high option that you can apply. I guess kind of a related item that I'll switch over to here on the other side of the building. We have this porch, and again, related to kind of this header across here on the porch, there's a new group of settings that is under the details, and we have the truss carrier that we've always had, but we have a new one called the open wall truss carrier. And this allows you to have specific headers and truss carriers, I guess, for your open walls. So they can be different than what you have for your main building. And there's a couple different things you can use. You can do the single, double, triple, and quad, just like you can do with the truss header and now with the header high as well. I use the top gird here. You can do either one. If you do the single, double, triple, it's just going to be just like the other truss carriers. I use the top gird. There is a separate material. So if you switch over to the single, it's going to open this up to where you can set up your truss carrier material. And you can match what you use for the rest of your building if you want to do that. If there's no difference, then you can just kind of leave, you can have this set up to match your main building, and you can change this product here. When you use top gird, it's going to open up this down here. There's just a separate material for the top gird, and it acts a little bit differently. And the one thing that's really different about this is you can use a single ply header or like a truss carrier, or in this case a top gird, and you can span distances beyond your on-center spacing. So you can change the number of bays that this can skip over. So the way that things work right now, especially on the main building, is that if you have a single truss carrier, then we force you to have a post per truss or rafter for structural reasons. But really, we're kind of getting into this sort of a bar joist thing to where you can span across this bay and get rid of this post, but still be able to support this truss. So you can see that I changed the number of bands that it's made to 2. So based on just my spacing here, that just got rid of both of these bays. So now I have this spanning across this entire porch. It's completely open here, I guess. Or there's no post required here because I have this structural header. You'll have to talk with your engineer, I guess, about what's going to work, but you can make those kind of things happen where you can span across the bays. We will do this for your main truss carriers in the future. Right now, the main building is still going to operate the same. I mean, we do have the header high that kind of has the same concept. And then with the open walls, you can do this kind of manipulation here, and you can skip these bays and you can span these across. We will end up doing that for the main building as well, if necessary, but right now it's just going to be those open walls and then this header high. And again, you can override the lengths here. We have the same length override, so if you want to, on your material list, make sure you get a certain part length, you can override the lengths that the program picks out for these. So these are going to be just like any other materials that you have in your database, but you will need to go into the setup wizard to set these up for the open wall top gird material if that's what you use, or if you use more traditional truss carrier, then it's going to be the open wall truss carrier material. So you will need to go in there and add in materials in the setup wizard for these conditions, along with this header high condition as well. So those are going to be new materials, new usages that you can add the materials to. Okay, I think it's pretty much it.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions related to this issue.
Okay.
The first was, will this work for the header high on an opening going over multiple doors if the OC post is set to span past both doors? So if you have 2 doors close together, can you have a single header high that goes across both of them?
The answer, I believe, is yes. Let's just try something here. Okay, yeah. So these are. So I have a general setting for the header high. So it should figure this out.
Ta-da! Single header high over both openings.
Yep.
Okay. The second question was, can we set up span tables to reference the header high setting? And the answer is not yet. Mm-hmm. Those get a little bit complicated, as you can imagine. So we wanted to make sure that we got this out into people's hands so they could start using it, and we could get some feedback as to what exactly those span tables would look like. Because obviously this span table winds up being, you've got a header that spans, what, 35 feet, roughly, 32 feet maybe. No, I guess it's only 30 feet. But anyway, it's a long header versus just a header over the opening. Same thing with the porches, the open wall framing. It'd be great to have span tables for those things, but we don't yet have that.
Yeah. Okay. So good questions. Okay, so moving on. One quick thing that's a new item that kind of relates to what we're talking about here. We have these, if you use the bay spacing, and this only does work with bay spacing. I have mine at 10 foot. That just means that, you know, it's controlling the trusses and the posts with this one single bay spacing where those go. And what's new here is we have this match bay spacing for purlins, match bay spacing for girts. When you turn those on, like I have them on, it just means that no matter what, the girts and the purlins are going to cut according to the bay spacing. So I'm going to get 10-foot lengths here of my purlins in this case. Assuming I have those in my inventory, 10 foot. All of these are going to be 10 foot, and same with the girts. So just kind of a quick way to apply that kind of lengths of your girts and purlins if that's what you want to do. So if I turn those off, it's going to go back to the way that it did before. These will come in off, so nothing's going to change if you don't want to use these. You know, I have 10-foot base, so I have a 20-foot purlin that comes in here in this particular case. But if you turn those on, it's just going to chop them at every post, structural post, and every rafter or truss, basically according to your base spacing. So if you do want to use those, there's some new checkboxes here that you can use. Okay, so we have a couple things related to posts. So I'll jump into the wall framing here. And one of the new items is a new gable wall style. And you'll see here I have these kind of parallel cord trusses, and traditionally these posts go all the way up. I mean, at least with SmartBuild, these posts are going all the way up to the top. That's the way that we've done things on the gable wall, though you do have some different options. If you do short post, if you do balloon frame, your frame, well, that's more of a stud frame kind of thing, but this is gable truss here. As you can see, if you do short post, your gable posts are going to be the same height as your sidewall eave posts. Inset gable is just going to bring in your gable truss, but it's not really going to change the lengths of these posts. The new thing that we've done is this inset gable short post. And this is going to inset the gable into the building here, and then it's going to cut these gable posts short according to the bottom cord or your rafter. So if you have a flat truss, it probably doesn't come into play. This is really for people using these kind of parallel cord trusses that want these gable posts to cut at the bottom cord or the bottom of the rafter. So it's actually, it'll come up to the highest point and then just cut it across there. So if that's something that you want to do, that is a new setting that you can set up. The other thing that we have added here is there is a whole new category for the gable post material. So we have this post material that we've always had, and that's going to give you the same post everywhere in the building. If I changed this to an 8x8, it's going to change the whole building to an 8x8 in this case. And But now you can set up separate materials for your gable post if you want those to be something different. So you can go into, again, the setup wizard, add in some post materials here, and you could automatically have your gable post come in as something different from your eave. I haven't added anything in here. This is the way it's going to come in for you, and this will even be hidden. So if you don't want to change this, you don't need to worry about it. I have it to match post material. That means it's just going to use the same thing here. So if it's match post, it's going to use this. If you do want your gable post to be something different, you can come in here and add post materials, and then you can change those. You can also set these up to be defaulted, so you can have it every building or your starting model, or you start from scratch, could have different post materials for your sidewalls and your end walls. So that is a new setting. And then one more that's underneath here is this top of eave post. And this allows you a little bit of flexibility to change where the top of these posts stop. And in the this is typically what we've done in the past. This top of heel rafter is what has always been here. If you don't do anything different, you can just ignore this. It's going to be hidden. It's going to be set to the top of the heel rafter. It's going to work the way it always has, which just brings these posts basically up to the top of the truss. The new setting that's in here is bottom of heel or the seat cut if you're using rafter. So in this case, I have these parallel core trusses, and I do have a heel set up on these, and that's what this represents here. So if we switch over to this bottom of heel, it is going to pull these posts down to sit right at that heel. So now there's a different configuration of where the top of that post ends up. If you have a rafter, it should do the same thing. Your heel height that you set up with your roof framing is going to affect this. We could change, the heel height of that, and it's just going to adjust that. If you're using rafters, and you can go into your rafter framing, and you can adjust your heel height, your seat cut, no seat cut, so you can manipulate that height as well with your rafters. So you can get this to where it sits at the very bottom, where the truss or the rafter goes over the top of the post. And right now, with the rafters, we're not visually showing that rafter coming out, but it will show up on your material list if you do want to run your rafter over the top of the post. As you know, because we aren't cutting these, we can't get a miter kind of cut on these in the program. So eventually we'll get these to where they'll be cut accurately. But right now, since they aren't, we're not going to visually show that. Otherwise, we'd have things sticking out of the building here. But we will get to the point to where we can cut these, not at a 90-degree angle here. So that'll be coming in the future, but you should get the right lengths of those rafters if you want to run these all the way over the top. Okay. So I think maybe that's everything here with the posts. You can change the top of the post. You can adjust your gable post height. You can change your material specifically for your gable. Yeah. So just a couple more things here. One of these items has to do with assemblies, which we talked about some in the past. And we do have a separate video that Royden did that goes more deeply into these. And we are working on these assemblies. So we have some things coming up with the next release related to these as well. But one change that we made in this particular release for the assemblies is making it really easy to get a one-to-one relationship between anything really. And the typical example here is let's see, I'll go into my settings just so we can see. So if we look at my roof trim, and here's my ridge cap, I have this flat ridge closure, and this plus indicates that it's an assembly. So I have an assembly set up for this flat ridge closure. And if we went and looked at it, which we can if you guys want to go take a look at this a little bit, I just have it set up to where whenever I have this flat ridge cap material, I'm going to get 2 of these Z-channel closures, which, yeah. So however many ridge caps I have, I'm just going to get double the quantity of those. So you can also set this up at kind of a 1-to-1. If you just, in other conditions outside of the ridge cap, you might just need 1 closure. And so if you end up with 10 of eave edge and you want a closure for that or something, whatever it may be, you can it'll just automatically match up a 1-to-1 closure to the ridge cap. Before, what we did was we took the actual lineal footage of this ridge cap and then would figure out the amount of closure you needed, and that didn't always work out to be a 1-to-1. And we heard from people that we just want to match up the closures with the ridge cap that we have. So if you want to do that, when you get into the assembly, it's called per piece, I believe. Is that correct, Mark? Do you remember if it's per piece?
I think it's per part.
Per part. Okay, thank you. So, yep. So you set up the material and you say per part for the closure, and it's just going to match those up, and you can double those, or they can just be a 1-to-1 relationship. Yep.
Previously, what would happen is if you had 10-foot ridge caps and 10-foot Z closures, Z channels, and you had 15 feet of ridge, it would say, well, I need 2 pieces of ridge cap, but I only need 3 pieces technically of Z closure, because I can use a 10-footer and for one side, cut it in half for the other 5 feet, and then use the other 5 feet plus another 10 foot for the other side. So we tried to get fancy, and you still have that option to do that. But what people were saying is, no, when I have a material list that says I need 2 pieces of ridge cap, I need 4 pieces of Z channel. So that's the reason for that option.
Yep. So we will have a few other things coming out next release related to these assemblies. So I guess I won't go into those too much, but we're going to continue to work on those, and we do have some other videos to get into those more deeply. Okay, so the last thing here, has to do with the ridge boards with rafters. And I guess we can kind of do this real quickly here. I haven't messed around with this on beta yet, but basically, as some of you probably know, we never cut the rafters. We just assumed, the ridge board in these rafter kind of situations. We just assumed that you can't cut that ridge board. Now we do have the ability where you can change and manipulate the lengths of these rafters. So you can come in here and override these ridge board. And let's see what's going on here with these guys. So I guess that is the ridge in this case. Let's take a quick look here at this roof. And so here's our ridge board at the top of that roof. And yeah, I guess so it is split now. So before, what you'd see is you would get a 40-foot ridge board. And so that's not really realistic. But But you can also come in here, and I think we could say something like, if you
No,
want...
that's the rafter. You want the ridge board.
Oh, thank you. We could do both. So you can set the plies for the ridge board. We could change the material, and now you can also manipulate these lengths. So I don't know actually if I have 2x4s at 10-foot length, but we'll see. It may not want to let me. Okay. So I don't have 10-foot for my 2x4, but if we change this to 2x6, I do have 10-foot. So that just basically said I don't have that. That's why I turned red up here, and it just gave me a 40-foot length. So something to watch out for. Do I have? Okay, yeah. So that now I have these 4-foot, 10-foot 2x6 for my ridge board. So now you can actually get lengths for these instead of just having a super long ridge board if you have a way of framing that. Okay.
Your product is red because you got your rafter length to something it doesn't have.
Yep, same thing there. So we could change this to 2x6. And then should figure that out. Nope.
No, it doesn't cut the rafters short. It'll cut them out of, trying to cut them out of 10-footers if it can, but they're red because you said you want just clear that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just clear it out.
That makes sense. That works.
Yeah. So we won't cut the rafter to splice it together in the field because that would be a different story. A ridge board isn't technically structural. It's pseudo-structural, so you can cut them.
Yeah. Maybe with a steel member, we might eventually splice these, but okay. I think that's pretty much it for the new stuff. We did quite a bit of other work. Before I forget, one thing I did want to mention is we've had people have issues with the Word outputs, the Word document. Microsoft did a change and it affected the way that our document templates work. It's kind of broken some people's Word documents. We are working on that. It looks like we have a solution for that. We wanted to get it in with this release, but it looks like it's probably going to come shortly after we release 1.83. We're just going to need to do a little bit more work and some more testing on it, but we will have a fix for that Word document problem where it's not putting the images in the right place and it just kind of messes with your formatting due to a change that Microsoft did. So if you're having that issue, we are going to be fixing that as soon as we can. It should be coming up sometime next week, probably mid next week. And other than that, we are going to get kind of if you use this as an actual like a webbed joist here, that you can get the look of that webbed on here just as a visual for these kind of bar joist situations. One other thing I guess I'll mention, next time we're going to be working on the spacing of these to where there are cases where you could get rid of some of these posts. Like, I'm not sure if that's the case in this situation, but if this spacing to the jam post, and if this jam post is going all the way up, then maybe I don't need this post. And I may not need this post, depending on the spacing here. And so we are going to be working on some options to where you can use these jam posts as like on-center post or just like structural posts, to where you can get rid of some of these additional posts that you don't need, especially in the gable walls, though I think we'll also be doing that and the sidewalls as well. And then besides that, we did have quite a few just kind of cleanup and bug items that I did list out. I guess probably, yeah, like we have 15 minutes here if we want to get to the top of the hour. So there's quite a bit that came through in terms of bug fixes. If you've had some bugs and issues in the past, take a look at the email that we send out. It did list those out. If you have any questions, you can call into support. I won't go through all those, but yeah, those are all listed out there. So at this point, I'd say let's just open it up to any other questions that came in, or anybody else at SmartBuild. If there's something I left out that you think's important, feel free to jump in. And then I guess we just open it up to anything anybody wants to talk about. Any other questions come in through the chat?
No, not since the other two that weren't answered. Did you talk about the 2D and 3D issues?
No. Yeah, that's a good point. So in kind of preparation as well for the interior walls, we have this 2D mode that you can switch over to. This allows you to quickly put in doors and windows. It works, and really what we did in this release, and this was a big change, so thanks, Paul, for bringing this up. We basically tried to make the 3D and the 2D consistent in the way that these work in terms of the input. And there were some issues to where when you originally would put in an opening and you would click, and if you changed, because you can come in here and if I really want this at 4 foot, I can change that dimension. You can click on those dimensions, move it over to 4 foot, but it was not always syncing properly. So when you hit return, and by the way, we are going to add a cancel button coming up with the next release. I know some of you have brought that up. You can end up doing quite a bit of work here. And you come to this point and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I need to do something else. And you either have to kind of save it and then come back. Anyway, we're going to do a cancel. But if I say yes, it is going to come back here into the 3D mode, and it's going to make that adjustment of the location of that door. And the interior walls will also most likely be putting those into the 2D view. And this suddenly started running a little bit slow. So it did make that adjustment. Let's see, was that this? Which one of those did I actually?
It was the window that you moved. It was the window you moved.
This guy here?
No, it was the door. I think so, yeah.
So let's see here. From left, 3, 8, and 5/8. Some of these.
Oh, it was that one. Yeah, it was the one on the. It was the walk door on the.
Okay, so it's going to be from the right here. So yeah, the orientation on this, you have to kind of. So this is actually going to be from the right, so 4 foot. Okay, there we go. So basically, we synced these up to where they're working the same, and there shouldn't be any discrepancies between how these get input and where they get input between the 2D and the 3D.
Okay, so a couple of questions. Jason asks, do you guys still have plans to add more job review tabs for us to utilize for extra job add-ons? And yes, Jason, it is still on the list. It just hasn't yet bubbled to the top. The next question was from Rick. How do you add lofts and interior walls? Well, you don't add lofts yet. Interior walls right now, the only way to add them is with the divider wall functionality. But as Sean mentioned, once we get over the speed issue, which obviously if you start adding a bunch of interior walls, it's only going to get worse. So we wanted to address the speed issue first before we said, now you can add more. So we'll get that implemented. Jason said, I love the 2D editing, but why doesn't it let us add windows wider than our post spacing like we can in 3D model? And I believe the answer to that question, Jason, is that I think now, because we synced these up, you won't be able to add windows wider than your post spacing in 3D mode either. And if that's something that you need to be able to do, I mean, do you really have windows wider than your post spacing? Walk doors and windows, we assume, are things that are going to fit between the posts. And it's only overhead doors and sliders that are going to cut the post. Delmar said, I noticed when you place a window or door next to a structural post in 2D, it doesn't place it properly and will have a structural post on each side. It should not do that, Delmar. If it is, we need to know that.
Is that on beta? Because we're trying to fix those issues. Because it's too close.
Yeah.
So
Delmar, was that on live that you were seeing that, or were you seeing that on beta? Because if you are seeing it on beta, then we need to get that fixed. To catch up here, people are typing in like mad. Delmar said that is on. We should check it on beta, if you would, Delmar. Still seeing it because we don't want that to happen. It's not supposed to happen that way. Since we've had jobs coming with windows, but your posts are 8 foot on set. If you have 4 foot post spacing, you will have windows wider than your post space. Okay. It's tricky because we purposely coded it that way to prevent you from accidentally in a window that becomes structural. I'll have to experiment with that. I think what we can do is, if the opening you're trying to place is wider than the spacing, we'll let you place it over a post and it just like we do an overhead or a slider. But if it's narrower than the spacing, then we'll give you the same behavior. Right now, when you're in 2D and in 3D, when you place a door or window, you have 3 options for placing that in a post frame wall. You can place it up against the left post, up against the right post, or centered right between the posts. And it'll snap to those locations. Place it, you can edit the location. If you try to place it in a location where it doesn't fit, it won't let you. It'll prevent you from putting it in there.
Is this what we're talking about?
Yes. I missed what you were doing there. Jason says 3D model lets us add wires that just moves the post over. Well, it doesn't really move the post over. It just cuts the post and puts another post over there. So what did you do to put that in there? Oh, you put in a custom window?
Mm-hmm. Just to get the width. Because I don't have anything in my inventory that's that wide. But I had a window there, and then I changed it to custom, and then I just edited and moved it.
Yeah, moving it is one thing, but placing it is a different animal.
Mm-hmm. So that was the question, really, is to be able to place it over a post on initial input.
Well, no, it's not to be able to place it over a post. It's to be able to place it even though it's wider than your post is. So that's something we'll have to make that work, Jason. Thank you. Devin says, if jam posts can be used on eave walls, would it remove extra posts? And the answer is, it depends. If you're using a single truss carrier or use top girth, either of those options for your truss carrier essentially mean there must be a post under every truss. And so if there must be a post under every truss, there's going to be a post under every truss. However, if you have a structural truss carrier, like a 2-ply or even a header high, a 2-ply or 3-ply truss carrier, then the program will remove the posts above the wall, above the opening. And then, but like Sean was saying, if you have a 3-foot space between overhead doors and a structural post, the on-center post would land in that location, it's still going to put one in that location. That's the other enhancement we were talking about, which was to basically say, look, when you're putting your structural posts on the wall, assuming that you're not putting one for every truss, when you're putting them on the wall, the first thing we're going to do is to say, all right, let's look at where your openings are, your structural openings. And any of those structural openings, the spaces between those we will treat as if it was a wall in and of itself. So in this context, if you have a 3-foot space between the openings, it's not going to need a post in there. You could have an 6-foot post space between the overhead doors, and as long as your post spacing is greater than or equal to 6 feet, it's not going to put an extra post in there. So that's the thinking for that enhancement. And what really comes up is on a gable wall, when you have a post in the middle of the gable wall, and then you put an overhead door on either side of that post, it still leaves the post between those 2 jam posts, which is not really what you would do. You don't need that post because you got a jam post on either side. Oh, that's nice.
I'm not sure what that was.
So Aaron says, can we get the wall metal behind the lead-to split to proper lengths for above the truss rafters and below? So these are that's one of the or porch enhancements that Keith talked about at the beginning of the webinar here. We are going to be working on improvements to the way we handle what we call porches. And one of those enhancements is going to be the ability to stop the wall metal below the rafter or truss and then continue it again above it.
Yeah.
Okay. Trenton asked, how do we adjust post spacing for just one eave wall while leaving the truss layout the same? So the first answer to that question, Trenton, is that you need to make sure that you're using what we call a structural truss carrier, which is a double, triple, or quadruple truss carrier. If you're using a single truss carrier or using used top girth, then we're assuming that you're going to have really a posted frame structure where you have a truss with a post under it at every truss. And in that case, you can't change the post spacing to not match the trusses. However, if you are using a structural truss carrier and you just want to change the post spacing for one eave wall, you simply go to advanced edit, select that wall, and change the post spacing. Okay. Duncan at Farrellbuilt said, can't porch with open wall cuts soffit like the wall is still there and does weird things with the posts and truss carriers. Yes, there are a lot of issues with can't porch, which is why it still has the red. This is an experimental feature. There's a lot of things that still need to be addressed with camp porches. And so much like porches, the porch fixes, the camp porch is another area where we have several enhancements lined up for that, and we continue to enhance that.
Yeah, we did do some enhancements on all the wall connections, right? That was a pretty big change, but it's behind the scenes and there's not much to tell people about. But it did clean up some of the issues that were in the camp porch area. But
Yeah.
maybe Sean, you want to show the commercial girts that we made changes to, and you would have to change your posts, your corner post widths, so that the wall and the eave wall is different for those people. But I don't know if you just want to talk about it or actually do it.
Let's see.
Yeah, so we did have some issues with when you use commercial girts, it puts the girts flat in between the posts, right? And what happens is at the corner, it looks at that other wall and says, oh, how wide is that wall? It's 8 inches wide. And it might be 8 inches posts in that wall, 8 inches wide, or 8 inches deep. But it comes to the corner. So like in this case, we've got an asymmetric corner, right? Sorry, an asymmetric post. So that corner post is actually in the eave wall. So the wider dimension is on the gable side of it.
It's actually in the gable.
And what we were getting before was, oh yeah, that's 6 by 6. Okay, so 3 ply 2 by 6. So it's non-symmetric. It's matching the standard post.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we switch that corner post placement to the eave wall, then it's going to rotate that. And what was happening is it was leaving the commercial girts either cut short or in some cases actually cut a little bit long. So we cleaned all of that up for corner posts and posts where we have camp porches and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Duncan said, looking forward to that being updated. We do a lot of camp porches. Duncan, if you have some examples of jobs where you've had you don't like what we're doing, please send those into support and say, hey, this is not working the way I'd like it to work. This is what I'd like it to do. Because, I mean, I've said this before, we just write this stuff. You guys actually use it. So, any feedback we can get from you guys as far as, hey, this is great. Now, if it would just do this, that's something we need. All right. Trenton says, can we get a feature of staff? Sure. 40 or 5 feet tall. Great calving barn. I think. No, we don't have an option for girt spacing. Wainscot girt spacing, do we? We have an option to skip girts in the wainscot, right?
What I've heard people do is actually make a 1 or 2 boards that are that thick, right? 4 feet, and then they'll divide that up. So it'll be 2 by 8s, but it's considered one board, and there's how many pieces on that 2 by 8?
You can fake it, in other words.
Yeah, you can fake it, and that's how we've got around that question. But yeah, that's been a question for quite some time.
Okay. Trent, would you actually set the skirt boards, or would you have a different girt? Because I would think you'd still want to use a pressure treated skirt board, but you wouldn't necessarily need to use pressure treated material up 4 or 5 feet.
Unless they're wanting it to get wet, like if it's a calving barn, maybe they rinse it out.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Duncan says interior curb work having barns and riding arenas would be nice. So you can do interior kickboard, sort of, by.
You can call it a sheathing product also.
Yeah, that gets a little funky though.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so you can put on liner and set your liner panel to none and still get wainscot and skirt board, I believe. We'll have to experiment with that. Okay, so he says that it would still be pressure treated. So right now we give you the ability to stack the skirt board, but that just adds another ply.
Yeah.
I think we've had requests before to say number of plies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've had a lot of votes for that one. That one's moved up the list for sure.
Yeah. So if you're using tongue and groove 3 foot to 4 foot skirt board without metal, using tongue and groove, you can actually set up tongue and groove material as a sheathing material, and then use that as your wainscot material without girts. And I believe you could even use that as interior wainscot. So you can check on has liner panels, and then check off has interior wainscot. But then you'd have to go set your liner material to none. I'm not sure if that would work. I know we had some issues where if you don't have interior liner, you don't get cut. Turn on the interior wainscot. And then go to details and go to interior liner.
Wall liner.
Interior wall liner.
It's just considered wall liner. Yeah, scroll down.
Yeah.
Scroll down.
No,
Up.
That's good.
There it is.
Wall liner. There it is. Set your liner material to none.
Not that.
Oh, no, not that one. Yeah, set the wainscot to lap and the liner. They don't want liner on the inside of the wall.
Mm.
They just want the 2x4 material.
They just want the wainscot.
Yeah.
So set the wainscot to lap siding and then the liner material is done. And we cross our fingers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The workaround for this, if it deletes everything. Oh, there it is. Good. Yeah. We did fix that. Good.
Yeah. So you can change the color of that. Obviously, probably wouldn't be charcoal, but
this is my interior wall I put in here.
Oh,
what is that? Yeah.
But that's the exterior of the interior.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yep.
Yeah. So now you have liner on the inside at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think does that qualify as interior kickboard, guys?
It's the visual.
Okay.
The other thing that I thought you might want to talk about is the outputs for the fascia and soffit info on the cross sections. We did have a lot of people asking for that, so just to show it, maybe. If you're not prepared, if you're not prepared to show this, we did work on the output for the cross sections, and we just now show the actual soffit material and the eave fascia material, the subfascia material.
So what was that? That was a request to.
That was on the cross sections. They wanted to show the soffit and fascia material
On the output.
on the cross section output. So we're now showing those. So check those out. Don't have any overhangs on this job, so we're not.
It's not going to help us.
No bother.
Mm-hmm. We need to fix this. Commercial girts.
Right, but commercial girts usually aren't going to have a truss carrier up there. That's why.
I have a used top girt.
Yeah, they'll have a used top girt. And then with the header types that you have, they would probably use a vertical or horizontal header.
Instead of a trough header.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else here? I guess it's time to get rid of these girts.
Yeah, that's all.
So your interior girts.
Yeah. The wrong
interior girt framing.
Wrong girts. Nope.
Oh, that's the top girt.
Yeah.
I need some more coffee.
Interior girt material. Oh, that guy.
There it is.
Just trying to figure out what it is you're trying to.
Oh, yeah. I'm
trying to get rid of the girts on the top of the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I want to see what this would look like. Yeah, I mean, that's probably a little bit.
There you go.
There you go.
Now you got stalled.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Any other things you want to talk about? So one thing we do need to look at is how do we let people put wide windows and wide walk doors into their post frame walls if they have a narrow post space? Because that's something that you used to be able to do in 3D, and now that we've fixed it so 3D acts like 2D, we may have cut them off from something that they need to be able to do. So.
Okay. Not a need. What is that it? Anything else?
No more questions on this end, and looking over the tasks, I think you've pretty much hit on all the ones that are more important to the visualization of the program. The other thing is we did do a lot of performance improvements this time, but it is in the background and we're still working on it. You may see a 20%, I think is about the number that we've come up with so far, 20% improvement on speed. But the larger the job, the more problems or the more features that you have in the job, it will slow it down still. But it'll be an improvement of across the board of each job of about 20%. Some more, some less.
We are looking at making that even more better.
Yep. All right, so you're looking Monday evening is what we're shooting for this to go live. Again, you can come and mess around here in beta if you want to test some of this out, and we will be getting a fix for that Word document issue coming up in the near future as well. So unless anybody has anything else, once, going twice. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining. We'll do this again with the next release here in probably about a month. And if you have any questions, we do have our support line. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.